Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Chris Before Coffee. Today's title of the show may not seem obvious at first. It's Remember the Future. There's a reason why I named it that, and it was because when we're talking about crowd sales and pre-sales like we will be today, one of the interesting notions that comes up is that the only way we can get to the future is by making commitments to one another. And the way we manage those commitments is vital. So today I'm joined by Joel from Swarm.
Hello, everyone.
I love the outfit. I really love the effort you put in. Most people don't put in that kind of effort. Do they, Theo?
Well, sometimes, but I'm going to leave the Terminator glasses off today.
Yeah, I wanted those Terminator. And we're also joined by Drac from Viacoin.
Hello.
Hello. So, Joel, let's start with you. We've been talking a lot on Twitter recently, and one of the reasons that this kind of came up was because I was kind of doing some research after the sort of the BitNation fiasco that sort of unfolded on Crypto Network a couple of weeks ago. What I decided was I just kind of had enough really of all of these pre-sales, and it wasn't anything personal against the people. I'd spent a lot of time at the Ethereum meetups, and I was trying to get to the bottom of the language that was being used. I totally empathize with this need to not incorporate, to exist on the blockchain. But I was a little bit confused because one of the reasons why regulations exist, or at least ostensibly so, is to protect innocent people from fraud. So one of the interesting things I found straight away was this Reddit page in which you had described investors in Swarm listed companies will be buying equity in the companies they fund. But then when I was kind of looking through your paperwork here, there was quite a strict adherence to the term crypto equity. And then when I went to the, am I actually sharing my screen okay? Yeah, you can see that. Then when I went to the Bitcoin talk thread, there seemed to be more inconsistencies, and then the inconsistencies were also raised on Hacker News. The links are in the description below. So could you start off by telling us what is a crypto equity and how is it different from a traditional equity model?
Yeah, first a clarification. I think I made the same clarification on Twitter. It seems like you found some Reddit thing that someone else set up that we had never created. So there were a lot of people who took an interest in what we were doing early on and started writing about it in a pretty inaccurate way, partially because they just assumed crypto equity is equity, and that's not really accurate. It's not in any sort of written description that we've ever made of it described as being an equivalent to legal equity. We've, generally speaking, define it as a sort of umbrella term that refers to any sort of thing you can do with crypto tokens, of which one interesting application is certainly tying it to legal equity, but that's an application that we've never done. So crypto equity can refer to a crypto token that represents a certain form of intellectual property, like the right to ebook and the right to download it. It can represent a product pre-sale, like right now in our 5th of November thing, we have a co-working space that wants to do everything in crypto, so it's basically represents a desk rental, and it can represent a comic book. That was the first fundraiser, so the Bitcoin comic, and you can get the comic, and the thing with crypto equity is different. So okay, I'm pre-purchasing a product, like that's something I can do with Kickstarter now maybe. But what you can do with this is add something on, like voting through those same tokens, so that you're then able to participate to some degree more meaningfully in the future of the project. So it's kind of a tricky thing because people are used to thinking of equity and government as a static thing, like here's a company, here's what it is, here are the rules that apply to it, and that's something that's grown up over the last 70 years or whatever. Like here's exactly what a corporation is and exactly what equity is. And kind of what we're saying is you can go back to the very beginning and program governance. It's no longer a static thing. It's a sort of mutable thing that you can customize for every project that you have. So in that sense, I actually think equity is kind of boring. I mean, it's sort of been done. There's lots of people doing it. There's equity crowdfunding that exists in some places, including where we started. It's not legal in the U.S. yet, but it's also not that interesting to me. It's so much more interesting to do these distributed autonomous organizations or things where you just create a project. It can maybe be more collaborative or an open source software project, and then basically people can who fund the project. This is just like something that doesn't exist. It's very simple, but like say I have an open source software project and I want to like need some development cost or whatever server cost. I can say that the people who put in the money then get these coins or tokens, whatever you want to call them, and then those people can use those tokens to vote on like what features should be like prioritized for that open source project. I mean, that's like something that in some ways is a very obvious application, but no one's done it. Like Bitcoin Foundation, you have no idea like where the money is going to go, and what kind of stuff is going to get prioritized in Bitcoin Core, and all kinds of things like that. And obviously, there are tons of open source projects that illustrate the same thing. So I don't know. I see it as like this really, really broad field and designation of which there's lots of things that exist in, some of which probably should be regulated under existing guidelines, and some of which are just totally new and kind of need to have some like custom legal structure that develops around them. So,
right. Well, let's get to the specifics though. By equity, do you mean the ability to? I'm able to buy a token, and I'm presumably going to be relying on the effort of others to see an appreciation of value of that token in the future. Is that right?
Well, there are different aspects to that as well. So one of the things that we have been doing, like for instance, everything on the 5th of November, is a pre-sale of a particular product. So you don't really have any like tangible like organizable rights over the project. So like I said, renting a co-working desk or something like that. But you're buying at a significant discount. So like you're maybe buying at like 20% of the eventual price, which is something similar to what you can potentially do in a Kickstarter model. But the thing that's different and very interesting is that you now have, because of these coins, you have a market pricing mechanism for the value of those tokens. So in the past, it's sort of a particular software. There's very little like cost of distribution. So a lot of the pricing, that's why you can have free software, not like free hamburgers, right? But there's actually very little way of actually having the market decide the value of a particular software offering. And this is kind of saying like actually what it is it's an issuing token, allowing the market to price that token, and that ultimately becomes the price of that particular software product. And obviously like that is but has a potential for price appreciation if the value of that increases from the initial sale price. But that said, it's a little bit more like a kind of commodities future than it is like any kind of equity, and it's kind of so the kind of regulatory space around this stuff is very complicated because it doesn't cleanly fit into any existing category.
What was the name of that company that I think they made virtual reality, goggle things or whatever, the Rift, whatever it's called?
Yeah, Oculus Rift, yeah.
Exactly. So that's what everyone talks about. Everyone says, yeah, but Oculus Rift, yeah, but Oculus Rift. They sold, everyone joined in and paid, $10 or 20 or a few hundred, and nobody got equity. And that's why the whole crypto thing has merit, which I think it does, but as we pointed out, it's a little bit, it's not traditional equity. Like you said, it's not a share, even though it might have voting rights, it's not a share as traditional equity is.
No. There's like this possibility long term that you could take some kind of offering like this, like I've just described, that's the initial product offering, and then continue to layer benefits on top of it without the need to go back down like an old 1.0 sort of VC funding equity track and set up a legal corporation, all of that. So like a sort of broad future for decentralized autonomous organizations that just exist entirely on the blockchain. I don't think we're there. I think it's going to be a long time for the space evolves to really like facilitate like the whole process, because a large company like Oculus Rift has to raise $50 million or something like that, or would at some point in its history, to be able to kind of scale and operate and everything like that before they have significant revenues. And right now, the ecosystem is not developed around these things, and there's a lot of protections you don't get. So, I mean, as someone who is like, backing a project, I don't really have like the same, on Kickstarter even today, like I don't have the same kind of rights as an investor who's buying equity in a particular, corporation. Like, It's very.
You have no rights. You're just buying a token that's going to get you something at a knockdown price or for free.
Right, I know. So there's a lot of things that you would really want to be structurally there before you start dealing with large amounts of money. So you want protections as someone who's putting in a lot of money. Maybe if you put in like small ticket size, and the kind of thing that's happened so far, a lot of people put in relatively small amounts into something so that they can tolerate the risk that's associated with that project. And I think that was the case, with. Obviously when we did our fundraiser, we did, less than like Ethereum or something like that. But we also, very much encourage people not to think of it as an investment, to think of it, as a kind of participation in the kind of Swarm network and the evolution of it, with a lot of things that were sort of in the process of evolution. And also not to take a huge risk themselves personally, because, it is a sort of thing where, you want to be at a place where you can, handle, maybe having a few things that you don't really know exactly what the outcome is going to be, because they're still very, very early stage technology. So
something that Preston Byrne brought up at one of the Ethereum meetups I did recently. I've been following the Ethereum guys for some time now. Was that if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's going to be treated like a duck in a court of law. And this is something. Also came up on the Y Combinator thing, that there's nothing about crypto equity that makes fraud any less likely than traditional equity. If you're the SEC and you see someone selling something that acts like equity, looks like equity, and is actually described as equity, and poses the same risk for the buyer as the regular equity does, the fact is that it might not fit neatly in traditional definition, but the equity is still not going to deter them from pursuing you legally.
Yeah, so I mean, if you are gonna make an offering that is just the same, like I said, within crypto equity, which is sort of an umbrella term, there are versions of that, and I would say BitShares is sort of on that side of things that are saying this is pretty much like a crypto stock, and it's just being issued as the equivalent of what a stock is, but it's not in a legal corporation; it's in some kind of other corporation, and that at least under my sort of legal consultation with kind of people who are active in the United States, and I think this also holds in the UK, is basically going to be under the same regulatory regime as a normal type of equity. So it's possible still to do it with a cryptographic ledger and comply with all those regulations. So that's not at all impossible, and that's a very interesting application, and something that we've actively considered doing. But it's also possible to say, oh, well, the regulations don't apply to us because it's on a cryptographic ledger, and I think that's people like Preston are absolutely correct to say that's not true.
So, are you incorporated anywhere in the world as a company?
We have a couple legal entities that we set up. Currently we're operating out of one, right here in Silicon Valley. So we have an office, and we're pretty transparent. I mean, you can watch our videos, and I don't know. We have our address listed on our website. Anyone can.
Well, what's the name of the company? Is it Swarm Corporation?
No, it's actually just some other entity that I set up before, and we're kind of probably going to transfer the name to be called Swarm Corp. So.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's take this into the positive, because one thing you may not know is that the World Crypto Network is becoming a distributed autonomous organization, in the sense that there's no company, because we're just a bunch of individual journalists that tweet and do videos. We've been live streaming the Hong Kong protests, thanks to the courage of James Bang. He's been going right up to police officers. We have, with his camera, we have addresses that are multi-signature, that are shared between, people in cross-border. But then again, we're not actually asking for any money up front, and we're not promising anyone anything in return. So one of the interesting things I saw on your Bitcoin talk thread was this idea of a decentralized due diligence system.
Yeah.
Tell me how that works, and is it working yet?
Yeah, but before I get into that, I do want to offer some clarification on the Hacker News thing, because I think you've probably seen stuff about BitNation. You mentioned that, and we worked early on with Suzanne, who said, "Oh, I'm very excited about what you guys are doing, and crypto equity, blah blah blah." And that Hacker News thing was from the Pan Am Post thing that she went, and she was very clearly in a stance where she did not want to do things that were compliant with existing regulatory regimes. And that was sort of a difference of opinion between the two, the two of us. And I said, no, we're not going down that road. And obviously she did with kind of the BitNation stuff. And so there's a little bit of confusion in that particular article because it implies that us as an organization are doing things that are like we just don't care about the regulatory regime, which isn't true. But one of the things that to go to the decentralized due diligence thing, I think is a really core component. In even just any crowdfunding thing that doesn't have we really are excited about high risk technical projects. My last 8 jobs were all like software engineer and building different types of things, and I've always loved startups and kind of building out infrastructure, and particularly distributed autonomous organizations and this whole wave of decentralized technology. So. I like that, and that is something that it's been a problem already in kind of Kickstarter type projects because they have someone applies and then there's a lot of risk associated with them, right? So because if you look at even something like the most successful Y Combinator, there's maybe a Dropbox or some kind of company that is going to be $1 billion company every batch, and then there's 50 ones you've never heard of and never will hear about because they failed, so. Their success ratio is something and maybe sub 20% or something like that, which is still awesome because when you succeed really large. So to kind of capture maybe part of that dynamic, so to accept some kind of risk, but then also screen out things that are very clearly not quality projects or don't have the kind of right sort of brand resonance or whatever else. So we set up this pretty significant screening process that basically people submit an application and it tells about their business model, it tells about the team, it tells about what they're trying to accomplish with everything, and then it goes through. It's rated by our reviewers, all who are people kind of part of the Swarm network, and kind of volunteers who just said I put out something in our forum, who wants to review some of these things, and a lot of people responded. So we have about 10 right now, and they do initial kind of review of the application as it comes in 3 categories: the quality of the team, quality of the idea, plan, and then sort of intangible. And then they also ask questions that they want the person to answer. Right now, those questions are sent to the, if it reaches a certain threshold of average review, it's sent back to the person who submitted the application or raised. And then, if those answers are, then it goes through an additional thing that the reviewers are able to see if those answers are adequate. And then if they are, then it advances to a kind of video interview stage. So we can conducted well over 100 reviews for our first class cycle, and people kind of went through and did a lot of background research on the projects and kind of comparable projects and whether or not there was really opportunity and kind of the team and all kinds of things that you have to do. So I'd still say we're in the kind of early stages of building this out, but I mean I really think there's a huge potential for really crowdsourcing due diligence instead of just having one person in an organization deciding this is the projects we want. And interestingly, out of all those reviews, no actual core team member of Swarm actually wrote them. So I mean we're really the projects were launching on the 5th of November. Really, you can say the Swarm chose them. I mean,
okay. Can we see these? Can we see these due diligence list anywhere? Is it functional? Is it operational at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you know? Would you mind posting the link, and then I can send people? There's a chat room on the right-hand side of this video.
Well, the reviews that the reviewers write, and all that kind of thing is not, not everyone can read the reviews.
No, not the reviews themselves, but the questions. It sounded like there was a protocol that you'd laid out for better.
Yeah, there is a.
Well, isn't the beginning of it on the 5th of November webpage where you apply? Those are the first set of questions, right?
Yeah. So all the questions are there that you fill out, and then there's also a link in the kind of explanation somewhere to the project review process.
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question? It's a little bit backtracking about the whole equity. So let's just as a practical example that exists right now, let's say I own one comic coin and DC Comics buys Bitcoin comic book. Am I rich then?
No, yeah, I mean, really, it would be awesome if we could do that. And there may be ways that we can kind of link. And the person who's doing a lot of the things, problem with legal things is that they take a long time to evolve and they're very expensive. Because lawyers like to charge a lot of money to have this stuff happen. So there is the possibility of like linking a crypto token with intellectual property and the rights to that intellectual property, such that in an acquisition or like someone like say DC Comics wants to license the Bitcoin comic, they actually have to license it from the people who have the intellectual property rights, which is the people who participated in the original sale.
Because that was the whole thing with the whatever Rift that did the crowd sale, because they did they did the traditional crowdfunding. Everybody got the product, but then they piggybacked that and sold it for like 3, 4, or 5 times of what they crowdfunded it for, and that's why everyone has kind of a negative view about traditional crowdfunding, or some people do. And I wondered, okay, well, what if I've got Comic Coin, or I've got a Decentralized coin, or Co-work coin, or whatever, and let's say, someone in the Silicon Valley buys the co-working space because they think it's the coolest thing. If the holders, get something, because I thought that was, of course, voting and all that is part of the point too, and that's really cool. But if that's the whole point, is that if something like similar to the whole Rift thing happens, that the people get part of the deal. But you said it's possible, but it's still in the works about the intellectual property and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is. And we're like, initially we spent a lot of money or whatever time devoted to building out the tech side of things, which is its own bit of work, the review process, and the actual platform. And you'll see our new platform probably coming out over the weekend or something. So those are things that obviously take a lot of time, and then going through the legal stuff and figuring out what's possible and what isn't is another thing. So if we went to the total we're going to ignore the law and just do whatever we think is the coolest thing, then we could do that. But that would probably ultimately mean that every project that we went to, first of all, we wouldn't be able to operate out of the U.S. We would not be able to take fiat from anyone, and we would only be able to accommodate or help very projects within a particular niche. So we've kind of very very much decided to try and take the slower route. And more conservative route, and kind of figuring out how all this can be integrated into a legal system. And we have actually this symposium workshop we're doing at Harvard with the conjunction of some people from MIT called Crypto Ledgers and the Law in January, to get a lot of the best sort of legal minds together to figure out the ways that this stuff can be structured so that it provides them maximum benefit to the people without having something like the SEC saying what you're doing is illegal, and here cease and desist kind of thing.
We'll get onto the SEC in just a moment, but I'm interested to. So this is the questions that the decentralized due diligence. I love this question here where you're like, please share a good joke. I think the SEC, if you're watching this, you should definitely take some lessons from these guys. Is this it, or is this just like the questionnaire, like a general questionnaire?
Yeah, so that the people fill that out, and then most of the time people have a lot of questions based on the stuff that's in that form, and those go back to the people who filled out the form originally. So
I'm really interested here because I see a potential for a reputation system to emerge around not only the questions themselves, but obviously around the people. So there would be some way for me to have an interaction with someone. Let's take a contemporary example, like, I don't know, Ryan Kennedy and Moolah. Okay, the guy's alleged to have run off with 5,000 bitcoins, and he is currently tweeting like an absolute troll, saying that he's paying everyone out. That so far he's paid out 6,500 bitcoins, and not one person is tweeting to confirm that they've received any coins off of him. Everyone's saying, well, where are mine? Where are mine? I haven't received any. So he's been served with an injunction letter from Salachi lawyers here in London the other day. In fact, yesterday he had until 4 p.m. to reply. He didn't reply. And I believe that they're now pursuing further legal action against him, including criminal. Now, it would have been helpful if we'd had something like what you're proposing ahead of time, so that the Dogecoin community and the people that put their money onto Moolah.com were not relying on this kind of like, well, you know, it's got a nice looking scrolly, pumpy website, as Theo and I like to say. It looked a bit fancy. It was flat UI. He knew how to look good. He knew how to say all the right things on a private chat room. But it was just that all he needed was enough time to get the money on his exchange, and then he was able to pull the dirty, or at least, you know, if it was negligence, allegedly, you know, he's saying that it was negligence on his part. He just left the server to sort of die. He didn't maintain the code properly. As a result, there was some problem with the private keys. So how do you see that reputation system working? Do you think that could have prevented something like Moolah?
Well, I'm really positive, partially on the reputational stuff, partially because of two things. One is, you know, this sort of next generation technology like Ethereum really does allow you to build fully decentralized reputational systems. I think there are going to be a lot of versions of those. But the second thing that, you know, is awesome as I see it is that the people in the 2.0 space, like you said, we all communicate with each other. Very active on Skype, kind of like, you know, Vitalik shows up in the counterparty one, you know, I'm in this Ethereum one all the time or whatever, and kind of like bouncing ideas back and forth between each other. And there's just a very positive energy network around kind of like making these technologies develop. So as well as really seeing things that are really technologically innovative succeed rather than the kind of, you know, scammy project. So I think there's going to be the sense in which, and this is actually something we did early on in our crowd sale, is we got David Johnson, who's now the CEO of Mastercoin, Robbie Dermondy of Counterparty, and Vitalik, all of them to kind of be our advisors, and they did a financial audit of our, you know, initial expenditures and budget after our crowd sale. So we really kind of structured things so that you know, there was optimal transparency and that there was kind of an accountability layer. And to me, like anything where there's not, you know, the use of, at this point, like multi-sig and, you know, not like some kind of significant accountability layer is just, you know, it's probably not a good project. So I think we're trying to establish like the high bar for what that looks like, you know, but I just see this in general as being something where, yeah, absolutely you need that, and I think we now have the tools to build that in a really robust and exciting way.
Well, let me show you something that I've been working on my GitHub, Joe. I really want your feedback on this. So this is an open source investigation that I'm doing against Moolah, and really I'm just kind of doing it as a journalist more than as an investigator, right? So as I'm finding evidence online, I'm timestamping it into the blockchain using Cryptoequity at the moment, just because it's the cheapest and I'm making a lot of them and I don't want to, you know, spend a lot of money. And then what I'm doing is I'm committing the evidence in a Git repo, I'm uploading it to GitHub, and then anyone can submit evidence. And the way they do that is by going to the evidence bundle, loading it up. As soon as they find a new item of evidence, they can create a new folder with the date and the time in UTC format, and then their initials at the end. And then, like, so let's say we want to look at the certificates of incorporation of the company, for example. I just click on that link, it takes me to the folder, and of course this has been hashed as well, so no judge is going to, you know, dispute the fact that this evidence was submitted to the bundle at this time. I also sign all the commits with my PGP key to prove that those are me, and then of course you can just open up this document. Now, interestingly, that document itself, I've got to switch windows. One of the interesting things, Ajan is in the chat room on the right hand side of the private chat room on the show. Now, Ryan is a very clever guy. He's done this before. He knows what he's doing. And one of the things that Ajan brought up is that he was saying that, look, Ryan can't claim negligence. That's not going to be good enough if he's a director of the company. Aha, he's too smart for that. He wasn't a director of the company. He was just a shareholder, at least in terms of the paperwork. So you see, his name is not on the shareholder list, not on the director's listing. He is just down as a mere shareholder. And this is often called de facto executive, what is it called, de facto director. That means that to all intents and purposes, you are the director because you're the one carrying out all the executive functions of the company. It's just that you're not on the paperwork. And I believe the Companies House Act 2006 did actually put provisions in law so that no one could try and pull this stunt. So he changed his name to Alex Green from Ryan Kennedy. He was Ryan Gentle before that. Ryan Gentle was the name he was born with. He changed his name. We have not found any evidence that he legally changed his name to Alex Green, and quite a lot of people have been working on this. I've been collaborating with some of the guys that worked at MintPow, plus a few people that had their money stolen. Now, at the moment, a lot of the sensitive evidence, like I've got people's addresses in here, I've got addresses of his family and stuff like that. What I've done, I've encrypted them, but before encrypting them, I've signed them with my PGP key so that if eventually they become a public record, we can just decrypt the blob file and you can prove that I knew of the existence at that time, because you'll see that my PGP key has a timestamp in it. So that's what I'm doing at the minute, and it's, you know, people have been contacting me, they think it's kind of interesting. The thing that I wanted to kind of thread it in with, though, was the blockchain IDs. So we had a meetup the other day. World Citizenship is kind of mistakenly calling it. I wish I hadn't called it that now. Everyone's having a go at me. So these are ID cards that you can produce at a physical meetup group. You meet face to face, you generate PGP keys in front of each other, you get in front of a camera, you put the Merkle, write down the Merkle root, the latest block, and you just hold up the piece of paper in front of the camera. You can then put your picture onto an ID card, you timestamp the ID card with the latest Merkle root and the block height, you then sign the card with your PGP key that people witnessed you generate, and then you timestamp all of that into the blockchain. And what that does is it proves that you existed at that time. And the people there can then vouch for you by signing your PGP key. And then no one can fake the passport because the passport was hashed and it was signed with the PGP key. So if you make any alterations to the passport, it will show up because the hash won't render properly. So one of the things I've been kind of thinking about, and this is all open source, and I updated the license terms, it's CC BY-SA, because technically it's not really software, it's just a process that I'm advising people to go through, and that's Creative Commons version 4.0, which means that you're free I want you to share it, I encourage you, but if you do, I'd like you to extend the open source license. I don't want people like banks or big governments to take this idea and then just kind of make it centralized and evil. So one of the ideas I'm knocking around at the moment is this kind of citizen police force. I mean, the proper term for it is actually vigilante. I just don't like what that's come to mean. It just means vigilant, right? And what I was hoping was that people would start to investigate these crimes on their own. The problem that I think we have at the moment is that there's not enough rigor, there's not enough discipline in these investigations. Lots of people don't share evidence with each other. They kind of dump it all into a Google Doc or on a Bitcoin talk forum. A lot of the evidence is too falsifiable. You send that to a police officer or a CPS, the prosecutor, and they're just going to look at it and go, this is a mess. It's like, this is not admissible. All that's going to happen is we're going to run into huge risk further down the line when the defense start appealing this case because we ran evidence that we couldn't use because it's too easy to Photoshop a document and make it fake. But if you've got lots of people all investigating the crime simultaneously, making commits in different parts of the world with verifiable PGP signed IDs, then it starts to become more of a self-stabilizing force. Then I start to see something emerge more like what you're talking about with decentralized due diligence. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think first, you kind of want the two sides. I mean, you want a good due diligence thing so that you're sure that, the people are legit and all this stuff before the project even starts, or, they get their first penny or, bit. You probably do want something that is the kind of, other side is like want something, some major violation of trust has happened. How can you have people that are going to like follow up on that and make sure the right thing happens? Obviously Roger Ver had his own kind of like thing for the folks who are coming after him. There's a lot of like interesting, applications. A lot of these do come into this sort of broad sphere of which I've written on, as sort of decentralized governance and how do you like kind of build consensus systems, because most of these things, there's a lot of things that are very high value that do not have any obvious profit model. So they provide a net benefit to the society or whatever group of people that they're involved with in a clear way, but they do not provide a like immediate, obvious, monetizable mechanism. So, one of the interesting things about kind of blockchain-based, consensus things, and I think Ethereum is definitely in this category, potentially. And actually, the coolest thing, I mean, we did voting with Swarm coins on a couple of different occasions, including how many, Swarm we should make available for sale and if we should lock them. So I think that was the first time that was done. But in some ways, I'm actually more excited with the counterparties doing with their foundation, is that they're going to have proof of stake voting with XCP, and then they're going to have a community representative, on the actual legal foundation that can then kind of be some sort of interface point to say basically the sort of things that should be funded. These are it's a very early stage, but you can see how this could evolve into saying like, okay, there's this need in this larger ecosystem around counterparty, around Bitcoin, or whatever it happens to be, to have some people, maybe like two whatever part-time people who are going to go in and follow up on these people who are trying to kind of create these scams and kind of figure out what's really going on or whatever. And ostensibly it could be that the same people who do the due diligence on this stuff are the same people who also do the policing, but our focus so far has always been on the kind of preventing anything from going wrong in the first place, because obviously it's sort of reputational risk for us as well if some of these people are going to go off and instead of making a decentralized dance party, make like a drink all the booze they can possibly drink on one evening.
What do you think you can teach the SEC? It sounds like you've got some pretty good ideas. Do you think they can learn anything from us?
Well, I think that there's a huge benefit always for like small, lean organizations and ones that have built-in accountability for what they're doing. That being in the private sector does allow us to have some accountability, because if we fuck up, right, the review process, then we pay the consequences because our brand is damaged and people don't trust us and all this kind of stuff. So whereas the SEC doesn't really have that, I mean, it's sort of an advantage that we have in the sense that the SEC doesn't have to do anything. It still gets money from the U.S. government, and they don't have to implement the Jobs Act, and they don't have to do this because there's no real accountability mechanism for them. So I think in some ways they should see like what we're doing is like I don't know, but they should like offer us their best people to come work for us to kind of help us do what we're doing so that they don't have to keep doing what they're doing. That's kind of how I see it personally. But I don't know that they're gonna like be like, well, we love what you're doing. Here's like our best people to come like mildly work for you instead of us. But I think realistically we're kind of covering similar bases. I mean. Although, again, it's sort of like the SEC's real job is usually not to like get the here's another thing that like was really, really cool potentially, and I don't know how this is going to evolve, but in the U.S. the securities like accredited investor thing is really some weird relic that is just totally inappropriate. I think everyone in the space knows that, and it basically says you have to have $1 million US in assets, not including your house, or be making $200,000 a year to be able to invest in like an early stage company. Which is just like, well, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you're like a good investor, and just because you don't have a lot of money that doesn't mean that like you're not like smart enough to make an investment.
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point. There are probably a lot of very poor people that would make great investors, but otherwise we won't find out.
Yeah, there's just no way for them to do that right now. And if you could like create this easy access thing that certifies that people know what they're doing, like even just a basic sort of intelligence test or like understanding how like things can appreciate in value and blah blah blah. I mean, this stuff isn't super complicated. Then providing the access layer, then the SEC doesn't really need to do a lot of the stuff that they're doing right now. Hopefully, like it actually because they're really working on this post kind of police side that you were talking about, where something's already gone wrong, and then SEC comes along and said, look what you guys are doing. This is terrible. So the enforcement.
I have a quick question for the November 5th thing. So if I have to if I have Swarm now, so basically I want to know, do I have to buy Swarm before November 5th to get all of these new companies, or what if I buy it on November 10th? Do I get Decentralized coin, or do I get Comet coin after, or do I have to own it before that company is released via Swarm? You know what I mean? I'm kind of confused about that.
I think it's going to be the discretion of the projects in question when they actually release that. Basically you need to have it when they release this. You're not going to get afterwards. Like if you get Swarm today, you aren't going to get Comet coin. So.
Okay, so you have to. No, it's okay. I mean that might be fair. It's just that it kind of creates this sort of urgency. Like, okay, I got to buy it now before November 5th, so that I get all the the voting rights and the crypto equity or whatever you want to call it before. Because if I buy it on November 10th, it's too late. I might not get all of that. You know what I mean? And so I guess the motivation is to go ahead and get it now before, because after I might not get it, if I understand correctly.
Yep, I definitely see that as being something that you would probably want to get in advance. So, so there's a little bit of built-in urgency. I think the more kind of obvious value that we have in each of these kind of coins that's in our network, like the more people will want to have Swarm, and that's great. So you'll participate.
That's great. Well, let's throw out the questions. Drac, did you have any comments or thoughts on this?
It's a very interesting space, and I think a lot of people are developing really nice technology to do stuff, and I think the issue is how you interface with the real world, and with real laws and real government bullies who are going to come knocking if they think you've broken their rules and regulations. And I think it's also very dangerous to interpret why we have laws that we have. Like in the United States, for example, this business of only certain people can invest, only accredited investors can invest. I mean, is that for the protection of inexperienced people? Is that to maintain a divide between rich and poor? Like we know there are a lot of laws which are protectionist. So I think we've got to be really, really careful. So I've heard a lot. I really like the things I'm seeing, but I've heard things that kind of make me afraid. So the first thing is like using these crypto tokens to do things like have voting, give some kind of equity and all that. That's fine. But it's just accounting. How can you actually enforce that? For example, let's say you run a crowd sale, which is a crypto equity. You're not giving T-shirts. You're actually giving some kind of equity for a thing like the Oculus Rift, and then it gets sold. So how can you enforce the distribution of the wealth, to people who bought? Now, if it's in normal stocks and shares and whatnot, then it's very easy to enforce. There are rules that people can go to court. But if it's just done kind of all hand wavy, you get some some tokens, some whatever token, and that gives you voting rights and it gives you equity rights. And what does that really mean? How? And I think that's the problem. There's it's just fancy accounting. It's not actually something that's enshrined in the legal system. Now, I think a lot of this has come about because of the concept of distributed autonomous corporations. And the original concept of a distributed autonomous corporation is you have a system like Bitcoin, which is in fact a DAC itself, which the nodes in the network define the rules. So it's an issue in what's that sort of thing that's being said now. It's not don't be evil, you can't be evil, because the system, the maths, defines how the system performs. So I don't know, there are some crypto coins now which have this, what do you call it, proof of stake rewards. No one can cheat the proof of stake rewards, assuming proof of stake works and all that, because the network decides what rewards you get. So if you had some kind of automated system, which was, it itself was selling stuff and making an income, and then cryptographically using maths that could be distributed to people who own the coins, or the tokens, then that's really what a DAC is. But what we're starting to talk about now is just replacing what works in the real world, the centralized world of, stocks and shares and all that, replacing that on the blockchain. And, I think that's really suspicious, because what's the advantage of that? In fact, at the moment, there are more disadvantages than there are advantages, because there's nothing to enshrine or protect that in law. You see what I mean?
That's interesting. One of the reasons why scammers are able to get away with what they do is because they're able to keep repeating their crimes. They just wait for a while. Like in Bitcoin, it's been scammers that have been pulling off scams for years. The same person, in fact, one of them, recently MCX Now announced that they were going to be deleting all of their wallets. I'm not going to put his website on screen. He doesn't deserve it. Real Solid has been a notorious individual in the space for a very long time. And the reason he's able to get away with this is because people just move on. You do a scam. What's the saying? You can skin a cat as often as you want, but you can only fleece it once, right? Yeah. So don't fuck them off too much. Just fuck them over a little bit, and make sure you've got plausible deniability. Make sure you've got some element of doubt over what really happened, so that they can always tell themselves it's okay, it's okay. So just before the SEC became official. And as you say, Drac, a lot of people, knew about this, but for quite some time. I mean, Charles Hoskinson was tweeting out all very, confidently that the people were going to be going to prison, at the end of this month, and this and that. And one of the interesting things was that he published on MCX Now, Real Solid published, we are going to be deleting all of our private keys to our wallets on the 15th of November, and you need to take your coins off. Now, just so you have an understanding, a Bitcoin private key is 32 bytes long. It's always 32 bytes long. A 2 terabyte hard drive costs about $80. You can fit about 62.5 billion private keys uncompressed in a plain text file on a 2 terabyte drive. Are you really trying to tell me that this guy is going to delete those keys? Given all the infrequent traders that may not even have read that message in time, they just left their coins there, haven't been back for months. If I were you, I'd start creating a collaborative Word document, a collaborative Google Doc. I'd start all putting down your deposit addresses in there and watch those addresses like an absolute fiend. Like, you need to be looking at what he's going to be doing with those coins. He is doing the same thing that BTCE have done in the past, where they regularly flush out their accounts. And the reason they're doing it, I claim, in my opinion, just an allegation, is that really what they're trying to do is they're trying to remove any incriminating evidence. There's a reason why those types of exchanges don't run off with the money. It's because they need you as a customer to help them launder the money that they're really trying to clean out in the system, right? So let's say you have an illegal activity that you need to launder the money with. You're going to need customers on an exchange, for example, in order to clean that money. You want to be as nice as possible to those customers. You want to serve them really well because you need them. You don't want to be screwing them over, and you don't want to be scamming them because they're helping you. Now, you also need to remove every last trace of evidence that could be used against you, so that in the event that your officers get busted, they can't go through the database and find out all of the, all of the things that you've been up to. Of course, one of the great ways you can launder money is by, setting up an exchange that trades altcoins, because now you can just air gap the money, right? You can go from the Bitcoin blockchain to the Feathercoin blockchain and then back again, or then into fiat, and there's no trace on the physical, on the blockchain. It's all in your private SQL database, and that database can be deleted. And so that's one of the things that I claim is the reason that they clean out those databases. It's not because they can't afford an $80 hard drive to store the private key.
Yeah, but I think, you're making a few assumptions there. Like, MCX Now hasn't said that they're deleting the private keys because they can't afford storage. They've just made a statement that that's what they're doing. They haven't said why. And I think BTCE actually has proven to be probably one of the most reliable and honest exchanges in existence. There's another motivation to be honest. I mean, you look at the Silk Road. by building reputation in the Silk Road version 1, by people building reputation and delivering quality products meant that they got more business through the feedback system. And Silk Road 2, remember, they lost a whole bunch of coins, and everyone said, oh, this is just yet another scam, set up a business, get some trust, get some coins, get hacked in inverted commas, and off you go, But those guys stuck around, and the last thing I read on some site is they'd actually paid back almost half of the coins that were allegedly stolen. So, I mean, there are other incentives, to be honest, because building a reputation is good for business. So
the thing is, though, you can just flush that reputation once you've built up enough money, and then you can just recycle and just go back through the process 6 months later when everyone's forgotten.
Sure, reputation is worth nothing when you're ready to retire.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I mean, it's all all this stuff is really interesting. What Swarm's doing is really nice. I like that, but I think it's also, in some senses, it's just replacing what Kickstarter is. It's putting it on a blockchain. That's new and trendy, but is it really that different to the Kickstarter model? Except in that you're giving a bit more kind of autonomy in the choosing process. That it's more kind of crowdsourced what gets on the platform or not. But I mean, the real danger, in these platforms comes in the presentation of offers, because at the moment, crowdfunding platforms are never offering equity, and I think that's on purpose. It's crowdfunding in the sense of, become an early adopter, you'll get some kind of reward, some perk, but you're funding a business which may or may not succeed, but it's all about the, for the participants, it's all about the perk. And I don't think the Oculus Rift, I think that's, that's a really difficult example because, they got rich, they cashed out, but the thing is, they weren't selling, this. They weren't presenting it as anything other than, give us some money, we'll give you a perk, and we'll build our business. There was never any sense that you're going to get a share. So it's kind of unfair. It's just, I mean, obviously, couple of months down the line, they sell for $2 billion, whatever. I mean, obviously, people are going to get upset at that. But my point is, the difficulty comes once you start talking about presenting things which are very, very clearly regulated. That's where I think it's time to get, to be afraid. Now, Ethereum is a very, very good example of this. They were going to have a crowd sale.
As far as I know, that's good.
Well,
they delivered everything that they were supposed to, I think.
Ethereum had this. They were going to have a crowd sale, and they stopped because they realized they needed legal advice, right? And you'll notice that their presentation was very, very simple. This is a pre-sale for distribution. You're not getting equity. There are no rights. There's no contractual obligations. In fact, we may not even deliver a product, right? This is simply, a way of distributing the first coins if we can get our technology working. And that wording was very, very, and they even went and said it's not an investment, and that wording is very, very on purpose. And because if they're saying, look, this is an investment, we think the value of Ethereum is going to go up, and therefore this would be a very good investment for you to buy, to speculate on, obviously do your own diligence, blah, blah, blah. But then that's very, very clear SEC territory. And when I say SEC, I mean all of the equivalents in every country, because every country has an equivalent.
I'd like to comment on that as well, if I can. And that is, I think that it's a problem that Ethereum has had, and to a certain degree we also have, in that many people, I think in the Ethereum case, even themselves early on were sort of because it has mining and all this stuff sort of as something as a sort of speculative investment, and then they kind of step back from that. And basically, and then in a similar thing like Swarm, people other people, we didn't describe it, but other people definitely described it as an investment. And I think ultimately we were able to steer that conversation in the right way. And we did an exit survey, to see why people participated, and certainly there were people who participated, hoping that the coins would appreciate in value, but that was not the majority of the people by any stretch. There were a lot of people who participated just because they wanted similar Kickstarter thing to fund the kind of future of decentralized technology and kind of be a part of it in some way, and also to have a kind of share and stake in all these projects that are going to come out of the Swarm network.
Sure,
So,
I don't think it really matters what I mean, let's face it, people only buy token-based offerings because they think that, it's a speculation. But I think it's more important what the people making the offer. So in this case, Swarm Corp. If you're actually presenting it as an investment, then it's asking for trouble. If you present it as, look, this is what we're doing. We're distributing coins, and they're going to give you voting rights to decide what we put on our platform and all this kind of stuff. But it's not an investment. This is just a way to participate. Then participants are like, well, whatever, this is definitely going to make some money. I'll be able to sell these tokens and make a profit. That doesn't really matter. As long as you haven't been leading or misleading people to the assumption that they're going to make a profit, then you're not selling an investment. It's not a security. And I think even if you did get questions from the SEC, you would be able to argue, quite reliably that well, look, we weren't making an investment. We were selling tickets.
Well, I think there is a problem. Like you said, in that a lot of people, and this is true of the Bitcoin talk world, for example, particularly, are there all doing altcoin speculation in the hope to make a quick buck. And definitely that is I don't know, maybe the majority of the funds that came into Ethereum or things like that are people in that category. I think. With us, we found that a lot of people actually came in who didn't even have Bitcoins. They weren't. There was a very different sort of demographic that they said, how can I get Bitcoin so that I can get some Swarm coins? And that they kind of wanted it for a certain degree the novelty factor, because it was something new, because they felt some kind of alignment with the brand, because they want to kind of support it. So a lot of people who were kind of participating were already in this sort of Kickstarter-y mindset. And you could say that for a crypto token, maybe most people just approach it because they're into that kind of speculative kind of appreciation side of things. But I think that's really where the industry has been so far. And to a certain degree, we're all kind of subject to the fact that it's been in that place. But things like what we're doing are actually really showing a lot of other applications of that. And I think that the intellectual property application, the voting application, kind of long-term engagement, the market pricing of products are all really interesting things that potentially can be combined into something that's very powerful and a real significant benefit on something like Kickstarter that is totally legally viable at the same time.
Yeah, but there's a reason why they use that careful legalese in the contract. It's because they need it to sound distinctly different to the marketing. And there's also the tacit communication, the things that you say but you don't say them. And the reason why there were at least three 500 Bitcoin quantity investments in Ethereum. And you don't put 500 Bitcoins into Ethereum unless you're taking a position in the market. Now, I say that there are actually two types of buyer of Ethereum. There were the enthusiasts who just wanted to buy a few tokens so they could try it out. And they just wanted to have an experience and have it as something to wear, if you like. But then there were the people that were quite blatantly using it as an investment. And the problem is they've got to speak out of two sides of their mouth. Because on the one hand, they need the value of these things to go up in order to be viable and to pay for their lifestyles. And let's face it, a lot of the people working on Ethereum do have lifestyles that do require a constant injection of cash. And a lot of the members of the team have actually been told, look, you need to cut back on your living, you need to cut back on this. And they're like, well, I can't, I've got real costs. I need to put a roof over my head. I need to pay for this stuff. And then on the other hand, they can't tell you it's an investment because they're not allowed to. And so and this isn't personal against any one company, as I said at the top of the show. This isn't about Ethereum, or it's not about Swarm. It's just in this ecosystem as it is. Now, so this is Kickstarter, right? And I just wanted to share this with you in case people were not aware of how this system really, really works. So you probably think you just have an idea, you go on to Kickstarter and you upload it and you raise money and everyone's happy. The way it actually works, though, with these systems is that you have to do something called front loading. Front loading is when you actually raise the money before you even launch the campaign. You usually go around some friends and you say, look, I'm about to launch a campaign. My target is $100,000, but could you all strategically start putting your money into the project in the first few days? The reason you need to do that is because the algorithms on their website won't bump you up to the top and keep you top of mind. Really, all Kickstarter is an SEO company. That will act as some kind of dispute resolution in the event something goes wrong, although they usually try to avoid that. At the same time as having the strategic buy-ins, you also need to be pumping the PR message. What you're trying to do is you're trying to put members of the public and prospective buyers into some kind of virtual reality. You need to know where to get the links. You need to send them all the messaging, get all the wording right, and you need to put them in what's called a funnel. Now, once you've got them in a funnel, they're basically watching a theatre production, right? They're looking at their Twitter feed. They're looking at all the pictures and all the articles. You've got all the messaging right. You've told the journalist how you want it to come across. Maybe you're going to pay him in some kind of favour or whatever. This isn't even controversial. Theo's smiling at me. Let's just call it what it is. Like the fact is, it happens. It happens all the time. We all know it happens. You're trying to put your audience inside of a filter, so that all they see is what you want them to see, so that you can manipulate their behavior. The behavior you want them to act on is the buying of your product, so that you can have your lifestyle. And I was just getting a little bit frustrated recently because I was like, why can't we just keep this simple? Like, why don't we just, like I've recently uploaded another Git project called Blockchain Contract, in which I'm going to transfer the ownership of a physical Bitcoin later on. And all we're going to be using is XML. And the blockchain, like that's it. It doesn't need to be any fancier than that. I'm going to start off by using proof of existence, and then I'm going to use Drax Biocoin later on. Now, I want to remind everyone that we also have Q&A down at the bottom left-hand corner of this video. We've got a question for Joel from Tony P, who says, which country are Swarm going to be based from, UK or US? Will they need to pay taxes if you're a business? So are you going to be paying taxes in the US or somewhere else?
I think ultimately we're going to end up transferring all the IP to some, boutique legal entity that's probably in Hong Kong or Isle of Man or something like that. Partially for tax reasons, which we haven't quite figured out because no one knows how stuff should be taxed, and partially because we can potentially eventually actually offer legal equity stuff. So it's still on the table, and like equity crowdfunding is legal in the UK, and we've been approached by a couple of the equity crowdfunding providers to potentially use our infrastructure and crypto infrastructure to be able to do legal equity offerings. So we don't want to be necessarily pinned into one market, particularly if the regulatory space evolves in a kind of negative way in a particular region. So basically, it's kind of like we're sort of staying nimble, I guess you could say, until there's enough clarity to figure out what the best approach is.
Yeah, but each project is its own company as well. So each project could be registered in Isle of Man or US or North Pole or wherever as well. So it's not only Swarm, it's also, so you got the 5 projects, they also have to all be registered, or don't have to, but could be registered wherever they want to be registered as well.
That's really what I was talking about, you see. So how do you make the blockchain representation of what is supposed to be going on happen in the real life, and how do you make sure they don't fall out of sync? So it really boils down to the concept of colored coins. You can say a colored coin is this car, or the rights to this car, and I can transfer it to you and say that I've transferred the rights to you, but what happens if I don't give you the keys? What happens if I don't give you the logbook, or whatever they have in the States, to actually transfer the ownership? You understand? This is really where the difficulty comes in making these systems work. autonomous corporations, distributed autonomous corporations before were meant to be like, little robots which are running a business, on the blockchain itself. They are making the money and they distribute the money. And now we're applying that concept to things that, we already can do a different way, in the real world. The only advantage the blockchain's giving is some kind of transparency. But then if the transparency doesn't match reality, then what use is it in the first place?
Right. That's absolutely right. All you're doing is it's called a state transition system for a reason. Like
there was a thread on Reddit a little while ago about how Peter Todd and Amir keep bashing the expense. How expensive systems like Bitcoin, well, decentralized systems are to run, and that centralized systems do it better. It's the truth. The Kool-Aid drinkers don't want to hear this, but if you're just taking something like eBay or PayPal and just replicating that, on the blockchain, then what's the point? Because the blockchains are more, it's more expensive to do. In fact, they don't even scale. They can't at the moment scale to those levels.
You can't automate the whole thing away, though. And I don't think a lot of the people that are drinking the Kool-Aid don't even understand what a blockchain is, let alone what it's capable of. Decentralization is expensive. Democracy itself is very expensive.
Right.
It's expensive to run because it's so distributed and so broad. Personally, I don't think that it's right that we automate everything away. There are going to be some things that we have to do as humans, and there are going to be some things that are going to be better for the machine to do. But the trick is, the clue is in the name, the state. The state, it just means habit, actually. It just means something that is stateful. It has habit. It has the same thing over and over again. And governments are there to maintain the status quo. That's what they do. By definition, they don't innovate. And yet there is something that wants to emerge right now. There is something that is coming out of people, ideas that are attacking people, often simultaneously, releasing white papers about the same time. They've been thinking about the same things. We all want this system to exist.
Sure.
But we're not being allowed to because the existing framework says, but where's our cut? Normally what governments do is they look for the transition. They watch the momentum. And once the momentum is too big to stop, they just work out how to become parasitical on the new system.
But you see, there's another problem, right? So I've had great amusement, watching. I mean, I've not been involved with Bitcoin for that long, but, you take the kind of conversations that happen on Reddit. Rah, look how great Bitcoin is, no chargebacks, low fees or no fees, rah, rah, rah. Then what happens? Butterfly Labs don't deliver, and then some people realize that they can go to some people pay by credit card, some people pay by PayPal, and they go and they get the money back from PayPal or via, the credit card company. And suddenly it's like, centralized systems kind of look quite good.
God, tell me about it. I'm fed up with the hypocrisy of this lot, right?
Here's another thing. If you get let's say you take the land registry out of the paper file and you put it on the blockchain and you use digital signatures to transfer them, just like you do Bitcoins. Well, what happens if someone steals your key, your private key? Now, in the real world, if I were to steal, the deed, or put a gun to someone's head to make them sign, transfer it over, you can go to a court and you can have that process reversed and nullified. And that's something.
You need one of the blockchain IDs with the deed as well to confirm both things, I guess.
Yeah, right. But what if you steal the private keys which control that? And now transfer someone's house. Now, in the real world, or let's say, someone comes into your house and says, "Give me, sign over the deeds to your house to me." It doesn't matter if it's on paper. They put a gun to your head, you sign the documents, right? That can be invalidated. They can come with the same gun and say, make that transaction on the blockchain. But if it only exists on the blockchain, there's no dispute resolution. You can't go to a court anymore, because how do you undo the record on the blockchain?
Well, I hate to brag, but I kind of came up with something that you might like. And so this is the first ever world citizen. I'm calling it world citizen. Other people disagree with the term. You can use your own term because it's open source. So Janina was the first world citizen. The other day we timestamped her PGP key into the blockchain, and she is now able to prove that she existed with the group of people that she was with at the time in such a way that no one's going to disagree. And I bet you, if her ID was found at the scene of a crime, I bet you they use that in court to get a conviction. I bet you they do, and that's exactly what we're going to be testing out. Now, the other thing I've been suggesting today, I came up with this idea yesterday, and I was having too much coffee. And that was this idea of a blockchain contract. I know that people have been sending me links to, you know, Blackcoin, and they've got that bit Halo, and there's all these other projects. I'm well aware that there are existing projects, not least Bitcoin and Clear Wallet. But what I was trying to do with this project was not try to reinvent what they've already invented, but rather to have a learning exercise to see just how easy this can be using existing open source tools, right? Without, you know, I've been to these Ethereum meetups, and they're very, very good, and I enjoy them immensely. The thing is, though, they're only really suitable for coders. And the problem is that we're at risk of creating this sort of technorati elite, this sort of class of individuals that have all this knowledge, and I'm really sort of channeling Plato here. There has to be a balanced relationship between the sophos and the demos, the experts and the many, the episteme, the knowledge, and the doxa, the opinion. Right? You always need to be in lockstep with one another. So the idea would be that you could make a blockchain contract just using XML. In fact, I did a demo yesterday. Late at night, so I was a little bit tired. So here's an unsigned sales order, for example. So Janina signed this with her PGP key, and what she did is she went to David Bailey's website. David Bailey is a friend of ours. He runs a company called Hard BTC that sells the old Cassatius coins. And what her software did is it looked at the product, it generated something called a purchase order, which declares her intent to buy. It then filled out all the details along with her shipping address. These aren't her real shipping addresses, by the way. And all I did here was I just pulled an XML, mature sort of XML specification that was published by Microsoft a couple of years ago, because I think you'll find that if you just type in like XML, it's basically called markup language, which means that it's human readable and machine readable as well. So all we're doing is we're using these tags to identify to the computer that this is a name, this is a street, this is a city. And if you try to generate your own XML document, that's own XML specification, that's called a naive XML specification. If you can find one that someone else has done and put more thought into with a much wider dictionary, that is much better, and that's called a mature XML specification. So I just used the Microsoft one. Her browser went through the website, identified all the product information, and she declared her intention to enter into a legal contract. That's one of the stipulations in law. And then what happens is that David Bailey's website will receive the information, and he will produce what's called a sales order. So he will then send back with confirmation and on the terms. But another thing that's very important that he's going to do is he's going to give her confirmation that the Bitcoin address that she is seeing is really his. Because one of the things you can do is perform a man-in-the-middle attack. So she needs a way of knowing that someone hasn't hacked the site, replaced his Bitcoin address with their Bitcoin address in order to divert the funds to the thief. So I came up with a way of doing this using bear signatures in the Bitcoin protocol. It already exists. You will need either Bitcoin QT or you'll need Bitcoin Armory. I actually recommend Armory as it's got a slightly better UI. What the merchant can do is he can publish ahead of time thousands and thousands of shared secrets with cryptographic digests like this one, in such a way that all you've got to do when you issue the sales order back to the buyer is just give them the public key along with the secret message, and that's all they need. And then they can just verify that that address really was generated by you, because they're able to check it against the public record. Now, the reason why I'm putting so much emphasis on this is because, like Drac is saying, I don't want everyone's activity to be tied to a private key that can be stolen. That's way too vulnerable, and you're not really thinking about the whole system. You're just taking it from a technocentric point of view, and you're not thinking from a user-centric point of view. The reason I would prefer if people performed all their activities backed against these blockchain IDs is that blockchain IDs can be revoked, because you're backing the trust against your social network. People know you exist because you are your relationships. The people that know will know as soon as you're not you. If you start going, batshit insane on Twitter, or you start spamming them, they can instantly put out a revoke request on your PGP key. This is already part of the PGP system. And then you can simply revoke the key. Now, let's say, for example, that HardBTC gets their site hacked. At the moment, with SSL, you've got to take the whole website down because a lot of the time the private keys are not air-gapped from the machine that's operating the service. So as long as you find a backdoor or you can get into it somehow, you can start masquerading as that other individual. Also remember that SSL is rather centralized because you've got to pay money to central companies like VeriSign to vouch for their authenticity. And I'm not sure about you, but just because you got money doesn't make you an honest person, right? Just because you can afford to buy that SSL certificate doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to screw me over. So I was like, okay, well, why don't we just have these PGP-based identities, and then they can be backed against your social network in such a way that those people can then start to put a revocation request. And if David Bailey's site gets hacked, all he has to do is revoke his PGP keys, and then Janina's software will know not to trust any of the addresses that she's being sent. So that's the kind of idea. This is the Casacious coin that I'm going to be buying later on. David just lent it to me for now. And I'd really like to get your help with this as well. This isn't, let me just say this as I'm pulling up the link. This is not, I'm not trying to do Ethereum. I'm not trying to do Filecoin. What I'm trying to do is just, first of all, educate myself a little bit better, because we could all do with the lesson in the obvious every now and again. But also, I want other people to understand this technology root and branch. The problem I'm finding is all these scrolly, pumpy websites look great, but what it does is it obscures the complexity underneath. And if people don't really understand something, they're not really in control anymore. And I kind of wanted to help people use these tools with confidence so that they actually understand what it is these tools are doing in such a way that if it breaks, they know why. And also, like, what if a lot of these projects go bust and the developers don't want to maintain the code anymore? The thing about open source is you can be left with a desert of projects where the projects have been abandoned, the code was written in a really esoteric way, so no developer wants to pick it up because they want to rewrite it from scratch. So I just wanted to go back to basics, educate myself at the same time as educating other people as I'm learning about all this stuff as I go along, and demonstrate to people that actually this stuff isn't hard. If you're willing to just sit down over a weekend and go through it, you can actually generate your own contract in the blockchain. Yes, it's going to take a little bit of time, but as you start to do it, you start to realize there are ways of, automating this.
Hey, Chris, I think Joel has got to go. Thanks for coming on, Joel.
Joel, thank you so much, man. Thank you for joining us. So, the 5th of November.
Remember the 5th of November.
Yeah. Where is it?
Palo Alto. So.
Cool. All right. So that's what's the website address?
You can go to swarmcorp.com, or we're going to be launching our new site, swarm.fund. So.
Great. Okay. Well, link is in the description below. Joel, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Cool. Right, I'm going to carry on plugging my products. One sec. Okay. So you can send me bitcoins, but not too many, please, because I just need enough to be testing out the. I'm going to be using a website called Proof of Existence a bit later on with David if he manages to make his way over here to where I am in East London. And what the money is for is I'm going to be buying this coin off of him. So if you send bitcoins to this address, your coins will end up being spent into the contract. So you're kind of going to be taking part in a little bit of history. Now, at the moment, I don't need a whole bunch of money. I just need like 20 quid here and there, just to kind of help grease the wheels and do all the testing. I just don't want to burn through a chunk of money. However, if you like what I'm doing and you think this is helpful, you can also send me some more money so that I can actually buy the coin off of David. We still need to go around looking for the prices. It's a 0.1 Bitcoin. Casacious coin, and apparently they're quite rare as well.
So wait a minute. So you're asking people to buy you one of those coins?
I'm asking. It's a scam. It's a scam.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I'm scamming.
How do I get in on it?
Yeah, man. You should have been in early. You need to get in early in the in-group. You should have been part of the Skype channel. Did you not get an invite into the Skype room?
No, I missed that. I'm in group number 2, I think.
Oh man, I mean, I can't bribe anyone else there. I've got to be honest, mate. They've already busted my balls on this. Yes, you are going to be buying me one of these because I really want one. So that's the scam.
But you already have one.
But I'm not. No, no. I'm just borrowing it. It's not. It's not. I don't, just
Sorry,
left it here.
digress, but
It's not my,
okay,
it's
no, it sounds really cool. I get the whole thing without using, so with just using XML and the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
I think that BitHalo is not open source right now, but I think they
Right.
want to be. So that doesn't count, I guess, because it's not open source.
Can I just say the one thing? It's not
Yeah.
open source for now. Like, we're not going to open. We will open source it. No, it needs to be open source from day one. Like, there's no point saying we'll open source it later. Sort of defeats the point.
Well, I don't know. Okay. Well, I don't know. I can't comment on that project exactly, but I just talked to for example, one of your favorite things. It has to do with Doge, of course, your favorite coin.
Oh yeah.
And I just talked to the DogeRain guy, and he has a really interesting app, and I really like it, DogeRain. And theoretically, I was like, well, that's so great. You could use it with other coins too. But it's not open source right now. But that's not because they are doing some kind of IPO for the software. He's just like, I have to. It's about security. He just is not comfortable releasing it right now as the security is right now. And they're even calling it a play wallet and discouraging people once there's like €5 worth of coins on there. That's the so there's more than one reason for it to be closed source besides, I want to make a bunch of money, and as soon as I get money, then I'll open source it. But I see what you mean, that if you really want to be open source, then you have to be open source from the beginning. That's a real purist way to do it.
The thing is, it's about the community, right? You don't have a project if you don't have a community. And so one of the things that sort of annoys me about all of these projects is they're over-engineered, and that they put more money into sales and marketing than they actually do development. That's actually one of the reasons why I like you, Drac, so much, because you didn't shout it from the rooftops. It was like you just worked on it. You put your head down as Ethereum raising all those funds. And then when you were ready, you were like, oh, and by the way, here it is, but you didn't release it to kind of fanfare. It was just kind of slowly to catch a monkey. And that's what I really support officially. Slowly to catch a monkey. That's how you should do things. And so I don't agree with this idea of, just creating a fancy platform and creating another coin and then creating another, so you've got Ether and then you've got gas as well. And you've got all these things. And it's like, yeah, I love the purity of Ethereum, and I really love Vitalik. I think he's an incredibly smart guy, but we have not yet proved that this will scale. That's one of the problems with it. It's all very nice and it's very pure, but we don't know that it's going to work. And why are we putting in all this money and all this effort and all this time now if when we try to run it, the thing just falls over? They can't even get their application to run for long 5 minutes before you get the spinning beach ball of death. So I'm a big fan of low tech. I'm just a big fan, like, let's make this really, really simple.
Sounds good. So can you so you're using XML and the blockchain, and that's it. I mean, I think that's pretty easy. I don't even know if a lot of people know what XML is, but like you said, it's a markup, so it's not that complicated as a lot of other things. That's pretty approachable, I think, for your average person. It's not, totally brain science to learn, I think.
The reason people don't learn to code is because they think that it's too hard, and they don't think they're going to be able to do it. And it's not. Actually, first of all, HTML, which is the original markup language, wasn't actually a coding. It's not a coding language. It's just markup. It's English with markup attached to it. And the only reason you're putting the markup there is to tell the computer what the context is to this particular piece of text, so that the machine can then read it and then implement it. And so XML actually chronologically came after HTML, but now HTML is on the doc type. There's like XML doc type, or is it exclamation doc type, and then it gives you the type of the document that you're doing, and that just tells the machine this is the particular doc type that you're being given. And that should inform the computer of what to do with it. And then all of the data that you put in to the document can be separated from its form, right? So the way it looks on the page can be dealt with using CSS, and the database can relate to it in a slightly different way, and it knows how to put all the records knows how to put all the data into the records and so on, because that's all identified in the markup. So all you're doing in the markup is just dumping the content, and then at later stages we deal with the form and the presentation and how it actually looks and behaves. Eventually you'll have the behavior, which will be things like JavaScript and so on in the browser, for example. So I think just by taking this down to really, really, low tech, by stripping off stripping off the alloy wheels, take away all the bump on the surface, and just show people, what is it? What is a car? What is it fundamentally? And so that when it breaks down, they're not always at the mercy of an expert. This was the concern that I was having, is that we were bleeding into this sort of extreme specialization where you just had, like I say on Skype, maybe 100 people or so floating around this industry that all know each other, that are all kind of colluding on these channels, and they're talking about, yeah, okay, so I want to do a crowdfund. You guys raised 15 million, maybe we'll just ask for 2 instead, and and then we'll do this, and it's like, okay, I understand the need to
well, it's really easy to front load a crypto offering. No, it's even easier maybe than the kind on a Quickstarter or whatever it's called. I mean, that's what a lot of people claim, like NXT did and all ever. They were just, they increased the market cap and they were just buying their own, own IPO coins, and then officially they've got this gigantic market cap, but it's just them buying it, from themselves. So, I mean, just because, like someone said earlier, just because it's on the blockchain or just because it's crypto doesn't mean that there's any less chance of fraud.
Absolutely.
And that's what. But we all have to be reminded of that. Just because it's, people think, oh, it's transparent or etc., doesn't mean that there's any less chance of fraud per se.
You can be negligently fraudulent as well. There is a negligent misrepresentation as a list, and what happens is that you make promises that you want to keep. And then, the rubber hits the road. You collect the money. You have what's called net present value on deposit, right? So I've taken something of value today off of you now in exchange for a promise of delivery in the future. The problem is, because none of us control the future, even though your intentions may have been good at the time, if it later turns out that you were negligent in the way you conducted the business, and then more evidence emerges that perhaps you didn't really know what you were doing, or I don't know, some allegations can sort of come out from people that you worked with and so on, then it starts to look negligently misrepresented. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got another question from our friend Tony P. He asks, can you educate people what open source actually means, please?
Oh, what does it mean? That's a deep question. Drag, what does open source mean to you?
Well, it's not really what it means to me. Open source just means that you publish the source code, isn't it?
Yeah, so. It's about giving up control as well. Like, you're not allowed to put any kind of restraints on it. And
no, that's not true. I mean, depending how you license it, you can have all sorts of constraints. Okay. I mean, the GPL, in fact, puts a lot of constraints. It says that, but I mean, that's sort of a license on how you use it. But I mean, publishing source code itself makes it open, isn't it? That's the whole point.
Well, so there are different licenses, kind of like Creative Commons. So when I release a song on SoundCloud or wherever, there's a bunch of options. You have the one where the people can play it. They have the one where the people can remix it or whatever. So I guess it's kind of like similar. What is this, GPL or whatever?
Yeah. So the license is how are the restrictions or conditions you put on someone for actually using that software. So, for example, if you have a GPL, if I write a GPL program, then the stipulation is that if I distribute that program, and this is really important for you to understand, it's not that it has to be open. I can take a GPL program, I can modify it for my own personal use. I don't have to release the source code for that. If I distribute that program for others to use, then I must distribute the source code, and I must also license the product as I received it with the same GPL condition. So, that's really what it's about. You have like MIT or BSD licenses which simply say that any distribution of the source code must include this license text and copyright notice. It can be there are all manner of different conditions which get attached. But I mean, open source as opposed to closed source is simply whether you publish your source code or not. And the licenses that you attach are a different kind of a progression of the open source. It's like how is this source, what are the conditions we attach to it, So you can have open source software which isn't very open. I mean, it has very restrictive license terms. So TrueCrypt, for example, had very restrictive license terms, even though the source code was public. Mycelium wallet has, is open source, but its license terms are very restrictive about how you can use it and, create derivative products or not, is the case. So it's really just about that. And the concept of open source is if you download a binary, you've no idea what's in it.
Yes.
If you have access to the source code and can compile that binary yourself, then you can be sure what's in it. So it allows some sense of transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What's Richard Stallman's quote? If you don't understand the software controls you.
But you see, there's a difficult nuance, because within open source you have what's called free software.
Mm-hmm.
So Richard Stallman, he's specifically promoting free software. So, and that's a different, philosophical concept.
Free as in freedom, not free as in beer.
Yes.
Very good. And do you think that I'm right to license my sort of processes under the Creative Commons? Because I didn't think that the software license really applied. It's not really software, is it?
Yeah, you're correct. For text documents and stuff like that, then Creative Commons is really what you need.
Cool. So Drac, let's finish up with you then. So I want to start using Clear Wallet pretty soon, because I know you asked me ages ago to do it, and my head was just too full of stuff at the time, and I've been waiting, and I'm looking forward to it. So Clear Wallet is operational right now.
Yep.
Great. Let me just go get the website up. So you've got what's Clearing House and what's Clear Wallet? What's the distinction between those two?
So Clearing House is the protocol, is the embedded consensus protocol. So, for example, the blockchain notary, how that looks, how those messages are actually encoded on the blockchain. It's kind of, the techie low-level stuff. Clear Wallet is a wallet which implements and understands clearinghouse transactions. And so when you want to make a blockchain notary, for example, then there's an interface implemented in the Clear Wallet.
Great. So I can just drop one of my contracts into here, into this document section. Is that right?
Let me get the screen up. Sorry, I'm not looking. Yes, that's it. No, you go to create, go to My Balances, and then under Address Actions.
Ah, okay, cool.
Create a notary document.
Okay, great. Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. So this is Counterparty, is it, or is this a fork of Counterparty?
So Clearinghouse is a fork of Counterparty, and so all the things you can do in Counterparty exist in Clearinghouse, in the Clearinghouse protocol, and then on top of that we've got the blockchain notary, which only currently exists in Clearinghouse. So that's something new.
Okay, that sounds good. And then the thing is, though, I'm just curious to know, do you only allow for SHA-1 or SHA-256 hashes at the moment?
It's currently a SHA-256 hash, I think. It does it for you.
Right, yes. But one of the interesting things I've been using Cryptograffiti, and I don't plan on continuing to use it in its current form, just because I don't like the idea that you're burning coins and they're sort of destroyed forever. It just feels a bit deleterious. It doesn't feel like I'm looking after the garden, But yeah, you see. So I like the elegance of the op return. I like the fact that you can just use the blockchain info API to actually retrieve it, rather than this kind of nasty JavaScript to find all the hex characters and so on that you have to with the other method. But would you be open to the idea in the future of making it possible to put in other form factors into the blockchain itself?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. I think it becomes very, very difficult if you are using different hashing algorithms, though, because then someone can represent the same document, as being something different with, in fact, the same. You see what I mean? You could have a SHA-1 and a SHA-256 representation. So
So actually, I've been thinking about this. Isn't it high time that Google got decentralized? Because Google would do a good job of, creating a distributed table of all of these different hashes.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of the blockchain notary is that not only can you do proof of existence type stuff, but you can then transfer those to other addresses. So, proofofexistence.com, you're simply hashing a document and dumping it in at some transaction wherever, There's no indexing of it, it's just very random. The only way to find that document is to, have the original. You can't even locate where the hash is stored, is what I mean. You need the original to get the hash and drop it into proofofexistence.com, which is indexed, which is central, by the way, is a centralized thing, has got an index of where which transaction belongs to which hash. So that's a bit messy. The blockchain notary solves this by so whichever address you use to create the notary owns the hash. And you can actually look that up in a blockchain explorer and find it.
That's nice. I like that.
So let me get an example. Hold on a second. So how do I do a screen share?
It's the green button on the left
side. There's an arrow. There's a picture of a monitor with an arrow.
Okay. Oh, right, so I'm going to have to drag out this window here. All right, give me a sec. I'm a newbie.
Don't worry.
No problem. So I've tested out Clear Wallet a little bit, and it works pretty well.
Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
So this is just a standard BitPay Insight Explorer, which has been modified for Viacoin's.
Explorer.viacoin.com, yeah? Or .org.
.org. So here is someone's notarized something. You can actually, and it's actually listed here as a clearinghouse notary. You see,
Did you code this?
I wrote the spec. Maran, who used to work for Ethereum, wrote the actual code for the notary, but I wrote the spec. So what have we got here? Yeah. So the only thing that's being paid here is the miners fee. So that's not destroyed. The coin, it's recycled, and it's a standard op return transaction here. I mean, if you decode this, if you decode that, then you'll get the hash. And in fact, why don't we do that? So hold on a sec. So what's also nice about this is part of the spec is it allows you've got the hash, and then you've also got a comment. So if you look in Clear Wallet when you make some notaries, then on my documents page, it'll actually show you all the notaries and the hash, and also the comment that was made. So if you're hashing, I don't know, videos that you shoot on a certain day, you could put the timestamp, or you could say what it was. I was in Tokyo doing something or whatever. It becomes a bit more manageable than the way proofofexistence.com does it. So
does the comment go in the blockchain, or does that go in the central database?
No, it's all in the blockchain.
Oh, wicked! Oh, that's really good. Oh God, now you're really persuading me. Maybe I won't bother with proof of existence and just go straight to this.
I told you it's pretty easy. I also have tested it out a little bit, and it's very easy to use. Works pretty quickly. It's pretty nice.
Okay, so look, I could really get behind this, right? Because I want to get this into universities. I want if let's say I decide, okay, I really like Viacoin, I know Drac, I've met him, so he's cool, and then I like the software and I like the way it's laid out. This is obviously much nicer than Cryptograffiti in terms of the UI and everything like that. Then I think you've really got to push this, and you've got to go to universities and other institutions that have surplus capital.
You see this?
Get them to download your blockchain.
Can you see this?
Yes, I can, yes.
Yeah, we see it.
Hex to ASCII. So this is the data that was encoded in the op return. So if I convert that, then this xClearhouse bit is the prefix. So all clearinghouse transactions have this prefix. The next bit is the hash, which is encoded there. And then this bit here is whatever comment someone put in. So someone was testing that. Test as test. They just kind of hit a few random keys, but I mean that is the comment that is in that notary.
Why is the hash looking like that? What is why?
This is the op return data.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but why is the hash, when you convert it, why does the hash not look like a regular hash?
Because the hash is binary. So
I see.
yeah, the hash is some part from probably from about here to somewhere. Anyway, that's
you can read the code. You're like Morpheus and Neo.
So you can, yeah. So anyway, if you were to look in, the owner of this particular address, if he was to look into his wallet, then he could see this section in the My Documents. And when you transfer this, so I could transfer this to someone else, then this will appear as a clearinghouse notary transfer. So
I like that.
Right. So I make you a logo. You pay me some. I hash it into the blockchain so that I can prove that I made it, and then when you pay me for it, I can then transfer it to your address, so it gets recorded in the blockchain.
That's really impressive. Okay, so actually I could do this later on with David, and then I can actually, so I can create a document that identifies this coin, and then you could just transfer the notary using Clearinghouse.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Wicked. That's brilliant.
It's very easy to use. There's no need for. I think anyone that's not a coder can also learn how to use this.
How much are you being paid, Theo? How much is he paying you to say that? How much do I get?
A lot, a whole lot. I just looked in my Clear wallet, and I've got 10,000 Drac coin.
This is exactly what Suzanne needs to be using at BitNation.
Exactly. I thought the same thing. Yeah. That's what I said. I don't know where I put it. I put an outline. I said, okay, you want it on BitNation. It has like I don't know, governance, packages, laws, blah blah. And I was like, okay, for each of these things, there's already existing software that's free. I don't know if it was all open source, like we said, but or halfway open source or whatever. But there's already really easy ways to do all of those little things that they listed. You don't need to have a gigantic platform to do it.
Do you know what? I really love the way Drax just fucking strolled on into this arena and just gone, yeah, done it, mate. You know what I mean? Like it's because it's missing the scrolly. There's no, before you go to the universities that have a lot of money, you got to get a better scrolly website going on. Then you can go to the universities with all the government money and sponge all that up.
It's really interesting. This, what I've done here, actually nobody's done anything like this. This is the proof of existence stuff, the hashing stuff and putting it in the blockchain is old hat, but this, turning this effectively into a kind of colored coin, a transferable colored coin, as it were. It's not a colored coin, but you know what I mean, is something new. But similar things like this involving proof of publication timestamping, in this sense, there are companies getting serious venture capital to build out systems like this.
Oh, tell me about it. And it's centralized and it's crap and it just does my head in. So what was I going to say? Well, look, I'm really impressed with this, Drac, and I want to start using it right away. I just needed the cognitive bandwidth to be able to deal with it, and now I'm starting to get that. This Friday, we're going to be doing another video at University College London in the crypto department, the cryptography department. So I'm going to bring up your Vicoin and your clearinghouse project to see if they might be able to have some server space or something to download a copy of the blockchain, because it would be really good if we could actually get your blockchain to be distributed out so that it remains decentralized. Is your blockchain going to be prunable? I understand there's this provably prunable feature that Gavin Andreessen has been talking about, such that people don't have to, am I right in saying that people don't have to back up the whole blockchain? They can actually leave elements of the blockchain out and just have the parts that they need to confirm the spending?
Yeah, the only bit that really matters is the unspent transaction outputs, isn't it? So yes, I mean, Viacoin follows Bitcoin Core, basically on a daily basis. We merge in the stuff that comes from there. So, and hopefully some of the features that we've got will eventually make their way into Bitcoin itself, hopefully. Although our strategy seems to be on its head. Peter Todd, one of the new opcodes that is going to go into Viacoin, Peter Todd suggested that we actually make that as a pull request into Bitcoin Core because it's useful for that.
You should definitely do that.
But it's really good because it's a genuinely good thing for Bitcoin Core. It gets the best peer review. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. The best minds in the world are working on Bitcoin Core, and so it will get into its best form. And whether or not it can be adopted now or later into Bitcoin Core, it's going to be the best thing it can be. If it gets merged into Bitcoin Core, fine, we pull that in. And if it doesn't, or is rejected, or can't go into Bitcoin for some reason, because Bitcoin's a bit big to mess around with sometimes, then it can go into Viacoin, no problem. And like the motivation for Viacoin has been to improve the ecosystem. I don't see a world where there's one coin to rule them all. There will be, it's a really interesting story. Visa is now the largest credit card, followed by MasterCard. But the first credit card was Diners Club. Who's even seen a Diners Club card?
Yeah.
We see the logo in some places, right? But
and AOL and MySpace and all the rest of Yahoo and all the rest of it. I mean,
So you're basically saying that Bitcoin is the diner's card of crypto?
Well, maybe I'm not going that far. But what I mean is that the world of payments now, you've got Visa, MasterCard, you've got PayPal. These are big systems. There's enough space for, and then you're having small. Diners Club still exists, JCB exists, whatever the hell that is. But the point is that Diners Club brought an idea to the world, and they still exist. They improved the payments network things. If Viacoin can make a small change, a small improvement in the whole ecosystem, then that's a good thing. I'm not
how modest you are. It's just like I just want to have a small contribution, nothing major.
Well, I'm not even I'm not fudding Viacoin, right? But let's face it, for any new crypto to survive is a miracle, basically, for it to survive. Yeah, Viacoin's like 3 months old, 3.5 months old only, so I mean the jury's out, but whether Viacoin survives or not, I would very much like there to be, to have made a difference somehow.
Well, I think maybe it could just be a bit of clever reverse psychology that Drac is pulling on us. Maybe he secretly just wants us to buy more, and by playing it down, he's managing expectations. So many teasing. Right, I just want to finish up the show by giving a shout out to OneName.io. Michelle7 tweeted us out the other day on Twitter to say, what about OneName? Because we were showcasing the blockchain IDs. And I haven't actually used OneName before. I'd heard of it, and I just thought it was the same as Keybase, only not as good because they weren't using very good PGP integration. I much prefer Keybase because it actually allows you to sign and verify messages, and in such a way that if you go to verify, it will even give you the person's username without you needing a copy of their PGP key. So I was delighted when I started using it, and I realized that they actually do put you into the Namecoin blockchain. And I didn't even know that they did this. So when you sign up for OneName, you go into the Namecoin blockchain, and of course Namecoin was the first Bitcoin. It was the first successor to Bitcoin, right? It was the first project that came later, and Satoshi was actually very positive about it at the time, and he thought it was a great idea. So I'm really happy with that. I've added OneName.io to the recommendations list into the Git repo, so everyone can know to do that. I'd actually say it's probably a good idea to have both a Keybase account and a OneName.io account. I don't see this as being mutually exclusive. The more evidence you leave for your existence, the more likely it is that you do indeed exist. So that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for spending all your time with us. I've got to dash now because I'm going to go and meet David to try and do something with this. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm probably, fluffed it up and going to embarrass myself, but I'm going to give it a go. Probably won't live broadcast it, but we probably will do a live broadcast later on this week or early next week. So thanks everybody for coming on.
Thank you.
That's been great, and always good to see you. And John as well, you've been in the chat room. Thanks a lot for your comments, and of course thank you to Joel earlier from Swarm Corp, who was here with us earlier. Talk to you later. Goodbye.
Bye.